In the previous video in this series, I started a discussion regarding the differences between pharmacology and pharmacy, and then I talked a little bit about how toxicology fit into the picture. In this video, with the help of a former classmate and colleague, we're going to circle back around and have a deeper look into the science of pharmacy. Welcome back to my channel. My name is Dr. Anwar Yusuf Dunbar, and this video is going to be a deeper look into the science of pharmacy. So the original video, which was pharmacology and toxicology, the sister sciences, there's actually a part 2 to that. And originally I thought I was going to go from part 1 to part 2, but sometimes there are unexpected things in life that come up, and something came up that prompted me to make this piece and present it in the middle. So before I jump in, I want to once again rehash the mission, and I think that it's important that I front these pieces with this because there are whole communities of scientists who know this stuff and who work on these things daily and yearly, and they've built whole careers on the science that I'm talking about here. And I want to say that these science pieces that I create here on my channel, these are created with the intention of increasing access for individuals who don't know any scientists and don't have any scientists in their communities, and who may never meet a scientist. And so I'm the first scientist a lot of people from my background meet. So these videos aren't designed to be the Nobel Prize winning presentations, and they're meant to basically whet the palates for individuals who may want to explore these careers and these sciences one day. And so again, less than 10% of STEM degree holders are Black/African American, and I think that one of my purposes is to at least try to make these topic areas more accessible and more discussed in communities like those that I come from. So let's talk a little bit about pharmacy. Let's go deeper into the field of pharmacy, which, as you'll see, as I described in the previous video, has a clinical aspect, but there's a strong science component underneath that clinical aspect. So one of the challenges of doing these science-related videos from a condominium in Northern Virginia, and just in general, is being thorough. And while these videos are for the layperson and the uninitiated and the people untrained in these areas, there's definitely a need to be thorough and hit the points that need to be hit. And I don't want to put out anything that's low quality, and I know that I have peers, former classmates, and now colleagues that may take a look, and so it's important for me to put my best foot forward. And so a former classmate from my class, the group I entered into the University of Michigan Department of Pharmacology with, saw the last video, and I think that the feeling was that I shortchanged pharmacy and what pharmacists do. And if that's the case, there's a reason for that. And I want to apologize for any pharmacists who watched that video and felt like I shortchanged the discipline. I had the privilege of going to graduate school with a lot of very, very bright and talented people. Many of them that I would consider to be elite. And this particular individual, who I will identify as Dr. Bernard, I don't think he will mind that, had a background, well, today has a background in pharmacy and pharmacology. So he's got both backgrounds, which is very, very impressive. And he is from Germany and resides over in Germany. But the internet connects us all, and so we're all connected, so you can watch stuff being produced over here in the United States, over in Germany. Anyway, as a scientist, it's important to have a level of flexibility, and it's important not to be rigid, and it's important to be able to admit when you don't know something, or when your level of knowledge in a certain area is lacking. It's important to be able to admit that, and it's important to be able to admit that you need to add on to your story. You may think that you've put something together that's complete, but another scientist may say, oh, it's missing this, or it's missing this, or it's missing this. And that's a huge part of science. You have to be willing to take feedback and input from other scientists, because people see things differently, and people may see things that you may not see, and people may have experiences that you may not have. And so then the last thing I'll say about this is your credibility as a scientist. Your credibility is very, very important, and whether or not people believe what you say is very, very important. And once you've lost that reputation for being credible and for giving accurate information, oftentimes your credibility is forever lost in that scientific community. And so I'm going to go back to the 48 Laws of Power by Robert Greene. You always have to protect your reputation at all costs. So I once again want to thank Dr. Bernard, and I'll probably thank him at the end of this video when this is over. So in this video, I want to talk a little bit more about what pharmacists do. And the reason I may have shortchanged the pharmacists in that first video was, I'll admit it, was ignorance. And honestly, I did not know all that pharmacists do. I approached the last video from the perspective of someone who always had my particular training and skill set confused with pharmacy, and my only knowledge of pharmacy and pharmacists was going to get drugs from the drugstores myself. So that's all that I knew. So I'm going to once again invoke my Stephen Covey figure here, or my Stephen Covey picture here, and which basically communicates that our lives are as we see them and as we perceive them, and that's influenced by our prior experiences and our prior environments. And the University of Michigan, it actually has a lot of schools and majors there, but for my doctoral studies, and I'm going to talk about those in detail in a later video, for my particular thesis project in the lab that I chose to work in, I did not have, I didn't really have any interaction with the School of Pharmacy, or I believe it's called the College of Pharmacy. And the University of Michigan does have a College of Pharmacy where pharmacists are trained and they go off into the workforce. So I didn't really have a knowledge of what pharmacists do. And so that's why I may have shortchanged them in the previous video. Let's see. So after that video, me and Dr. Bernard, we talked over direct message, and he said, if you want to learn some more about what pharmacists do, I'd be happy to talk to you about it. So I said, okay, yeah, let me know. Let's talk. So Dr. Bernard shared a whole lot of characterization about what pharmacists do, and as opposed to reinventing the wheel, I'm just going to share what he shared with me, and I don't think he will mind. So, here we go. Let's jump into what Dr. Bernard shared with me. What Dr. Bernard shared with me about pharmacy. So his message says, "Hi Anwar. Come to think about it, you know that in Europe the term chemist is synonymous with pharmacist. But it might not be the same. Clearly German pharmacies are very different from American drugstores. And the same might be true for hospital pharmacies. I worked for 6 months in one, and the work there is also different than what you described in your video for what pharmacists do in the United States. Nonetheless, pharmacists have more expertise than you described in the video. They are experts on drug formulations. The tablet that contains the ibuprofen, so in the previous video I dumped some of these out and showed them to you. So the tablet that contains the ibuprofen here, the coating that protects it in the stomach and makes sure that the timely release of the ibuprofen happens in the duodenum, that is what the pharmacist must make sure of. So I'm going to stop there, and I think that's a very good. This is a very good reason to open up my human torso model and talk a little bit about what that is, the duodenum and the stomach, and what pharmacists have to think about when creating a medication. So we'll do that right now. So we're going to put our physiologist's hat on right now, and we're going to take this guy apart. This is history. This is my first time on my YouTube channel taking this torso model apart. So we're going to take the head off first, like this. That there. Take the lungs out. Take the heart off. And we're going to take the liver off. And so what we're left with here is the gastrointestinal tract. And so what happens is, whenever you take a medication orally, it goes down through the esophagus here, and it enters the stomach here, which is this sac right here. And so now we're going to put on our chemistry hat. And so what physiologists know is that the environment inside the stomach is acidic. And so, as Dr. Bernard said, the pharmacist must take that into consideration. And create a coat, a formulation coat around that ibuprofen, so that the pill stays intact inside the stomach. Now, once that pill passes through the stomach, it enters something, this little passageway called the duodenum, which is the passageway from the stomach into the first part of the small intestine here. This is the small intestine, and it's we learned this in physiology. That's very convoluted, and if you unwind the small intestine, it goes for a very, very long distance. But what I want to get across to you in this video is that the environment is very different in the small intestine in comparison to the stomach. This is very acidic, and the environment in the small intestine is very alkali, so it's basic. So you're going from acidic to something more basic. And so the pharmacist has to take that into consideration when they are designing the coating for the pill with the active ingredient on the inside. So they want it to stay intact in here so that it can get to here, dissolve, and then get absorbed into the liver and then into the bloodstream. So before I get to the remainder of Dr. Bernard's letter, I want to make sure that I'm clear on 2 points. So the duodenum is actually the initial portion of the small intestine, and so that's not a part of the stomach, it's the initial portion of the small intestine. The second point is that I believe that I said that the small intestine is very basic or very alkali. Well, it actually gets up to about 9. So you're going from a pH of 1 to 3 in the stomach to a pH of about 6 in the duodenum to a pH of about 9 in the small intestine, where the drug gets absorbed into the liver from the portal vein. So it's not very, very alkali. It's about 9, but still that's a significant transition from the pH in the stomach. So this is something that pharmacists have to be cognizant of. Okay, so going back to Dr. Bernard's letter. In terms of the hospital, we must often give drugs to children, but often there are only adult doses available, and small kids can't swallow those, but they must take the drug home. Let's see. Pharmacists solve that for you by preparing a suspension, an ointment, a lotion, or even an IV bottle if needed. In your slide, you show at 18 minutes and 53 seconds, 18 minutes and 53 seconds, all the stuff that pharmacologists do. There are equivalent jobs for pharmacists that nicely contrast this. In terms of an oral application, the pharmacist makes sure that the drug accumulates where it needs to be and that it is not destroyed along the way. So that's going back to the passage through the stomach to the duodenum to the small intestine. He or she also checks for drug-drug interactions with other medications. So sometimes drugs can react with other medications to make the patient more sick. For drugs that are given through inhalation, pharmacists, at least here in Europe, teach the patient the proper use of each inhaler to make sure that the drug goes into the entire lung. And so in the previous video I talked about albuterol, and that's a drug that patients who suffer from asthma take, and they take the albuterol usually with inhalers. So now Dr. Bernard's talking about dermal applications with creams and ointments. The pharmacists know the properties of the drug and what the best carrier is for substances and mixtures, so the drug is released where intended. So, they know they have to figure out the best way to deliver that drug with or without an ointment, a base, an ointment base, a gel, or an emulsion. So in essence, pharmacists know the physical properties of the drug and the body compartment the drug goes through and the compartment where it needs to act, and they make sure that it gets there. So he states that regarding pharmacologists, you could also mention that some pharmacologists use drugs to study bodily functions that are yet unknown. So that's on the research side. And there was actually a professor at the University of Michigan in our Department of Pharmacology who tested cardiovascular drugs for pharmaceutical companies. But the drugs can also be used as models for characterizing unknown bodily functions, as Dr. Bernard just said. So they could be used as tools as well, in addition to clinical medications. He says, lastly, I also think that one could see pharmacists, pharmacologists, and toxicologists as specialized chemists. So all three scientific disciplines strongly rely on a knowledge of chemistry. Because a deep chemistry knowledge is what they have in common, it is just applied differently. So that concludes Dr. Bernard's letter, and I want to thank Dr. Bernard for pulling my coat and calling to my attention that there's more to pharmacy than what I said in my previous video. So that's a deeper look at pharmacy. And once again, as a scientist, no matter what kind of scientist you are, you have to have that flexibility to admit when you don't know something, and understand when you don't know something, and to understand when you can give a more complete story or a more complete picture for whatever it is you're trying to communicate, whether it's a oral presentation or a training or a research paper or a YouTube video. So with that, I am going to conclude. Please leave any comments or questions in the description box below. For the next video, I will probably return to the part 2 of my pharmacology and toxicology sister sciences videos. So it'll probably be the follow-up to the previous video, pharmacology and toxicology, the sister sciences. And with that, I will conclude. Always remember that your attitude determines your altitude. Take care, and I will talk to you the next time. Bye-bye.